Hello, everyone, and welcome to Impact. I'm Nick Barber, your host for the government segment, and today's guest is Judge Matt Sypniewski. And Judge Sypniewski is the City Court Judge for the City of Schenectady, New York. Welcome, Judge.
Nick, thanks for having me.
How
I
are
really
you?
appreciate it. I'm good,
Good.
thank you.
We're not exactly strangers. Our paths have crossed in the past when you worked in the county office building. And this is an opportunity to let people know who you are. Judges have a long-term, 10-year terms, most judges in New York State, and they're limited to their public attendance to different events and things like that. So they really are not able to become familiar with people in the way that other elected officials are. So that's why this is a good thing. Impact is a good forum to profile people and tell them a little bit about you and what you do. You're the sitting Schenectady City Court Judge, and you were appointed or sworn in January of 2011, correct?
That's right, Nick. And first, let me thank you for inviting me onto the show. You're right.
Yes.
There are only so many opportunities we have as judges to speak to our communities, to your listeners. So this is a good opportunity to do that, and I appreciate it. That's right, Nick. And I was initially appointed to fill a vacancy at the Schenectady City Court. January 2011, I assumed that position and was a sitting judge throughout 2011 when I ultimately ran for election for a full term in that November 2011.
And before we get into the progression, let's go back to the early days, okay?
Yeah.
You went to law school,
That's
obviously.
right, that's
Where'd you
right.
go to law school?
It does feel like we're starting to go back now, too.
Yeah, we're going to go back a little bit.
I went to Albany Law School here in the Capital District.
Great
Prior to that,
school.
I went to SUNY Albany as well. So
Yes.
I was local throughout my postgraduate and college years.
What affected your decision to go to law school? Why did you want to become a lawyer?
Well, I was interested first in being a trial attorney. I found it fascinating that individuals in our system, which we have one of the most unique systems in the world, it's an adversary system. The litigants in a courtroom arguing cases are striving their best to seek justice, and in the end, it was the responsibility, the excitement of being able to possibly do that one day that drew me to the law.
And affect change, too. That's stimulating and motivating.
Certainly in an individual case, you're having a huge impact or change in the people's lives.
I like that word,
you
impact.
represent.
And our show, Impact.
Who you represent.
Right, so there's,
in any case.
seriously, there's probably, I'm sorry to interrupt you, probably a lot of satisfaction out of getting justice, if you would, in the legal system, helping people. And
It's rewarding.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That's great. Let's go back to the progression of your career. You went to law school, and then what was your first real job after you got out of law school?
First real job was to act as a judicial clerk. That was at the appellate division of the 3rd Department, which covers not only Schenectady but several other counties in this area. And what I mean by appellate division is that any individuals in a lower court, perhaps a city court, which I now preside over, or a county court, in a criminal court, or in a Supreme Court case, whenever those individuals feel aggrieved, feel that something was not done correctly, some error was committed during their case, they appeal it. They
Yes.
take it to a higher level, and they ask the judges of that court to look at the case, and they argue that those justices should agree with them and perhaps overturn the case or give them some other sort of relief. So I was a clerk in that capacity for right after graduating from law school.
And that's really good training and background. Now, in New York State, do you call that an appeals court or appellate? What do you call it?
It's 3rd Department Appellate Division.
Appellate
we
Division.
have 4 of them throughout New York. We
Right.
have 4 different departments. It's our intermediate level of appeal.
Okay.
For instance, after a county court case, if somebody were to be convicted of a felony in county court, they would appeal to the 3rd Department if they were convicted here in Schenectady.
Appellate Division.
Correct.
Okay.
After that, if they were to, I guess, so-called lose in,
Yes.
in the appellate division, you have the opportunity to at least seek a higher form of appeal. That's our highest court, the Court of Appeals. So
Okay.
we have 2 higher levels of appeal.
You're local, right? You came from this area?
That's right. Born and raised
Yeah.
in Schenectady. My parents are still in the city. My dad's at GE. My mom's at Pleasant Valley. She's a teacher's aide there.
I went to Pleasant Valley. Really? She's at Pleasant Valley? That's a nice little
And there was
school,
an
yeah.
article recently about Pleasant Valley and what's up on that
The
fourth floor. The
yeah,
Gazette.
yeah.
But she's there now, and I have two brothers as well. But born and raised, I went through our public schools,
Yeah.
and for that reason, even while down in the city, while enjoying this experience and the excitement of living in Manhattan, I had always envisioned perhaps coming back.
And around 2004, you got that call
I
to
did.
come back. You had another opportunity.
I did.
So what happened then?
Well, a position opened up in the district attorney's office here in Schenectady County.
Right.
And I was fortunate enough that our DA, Bob Carney, hired me, and that was in 2004. And I was with the district attorney's office and DA Carney up until that 2011 appointment to the city court bench.
And you had an opportunity, political endorsement and support to become a judge.
Yep.
And you were appointed. But that appointment didn't last long because you had to run again, didn't you?
I did, and the one person I didn't mention is my wife. We also live in the city now, Diane. And when it came to running,
Hi,
that's
Diane.
That's why I bring her up, because she was a big help.
Well, I just want to say thank you, Diane, for supporting him because Judge Sypniewski's a great judge. You've done a great job. So,
And with her help, any campaign is difficult. It was the first time I had ever run, but we did get through it. We worked hard, and I was elected to a full term, which I was sworn into in 2012.
and that's
January.
a 10-year term in
is
the
a-
judiciary, generally speaking, in New York State, right?
It's a 10-year term, correct.
Yeah.
And that goes the same. That's likewise for county court judge, family court judge, all 10-year terms. The one term that's longer is Supreme Court, which is 14 years.
14 years.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You worked for the DA for about 7 years, wasn't it? Something like that?
7 years. Yep.
Yeah, 7 years. What was that experience like running the political part? I mean, I've done it. I know it's great to meet people, and it's a whirlwind, especially the last 10 weeks of a campaign. Is it something that you found pressing or enjoyable, or it was a brand new experience the first time you ran for public office? How did you feel about that?
I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed meeting people,
Yeah.
campaigning. Perhaps it was natural to me. I don't know, but I did enjoy to speaking to a lot of people. And when it comes to our court system here in Schenectady, our citizens, our residents, the community, they have questions on your doorstep. When you knock and you tell them you're running for judge,
Yes.
there's always questions.
Oh, absolutely.
It's that,
Yeah.
it's that one branch that perhaps they don't know as much about.
Yeah.
I always remind them that it's not the branch that raises taxes. Don't worry about that. I'm not that sort of.
You're
I'm not running
safe.
for that sort of office. And once I say that,
You're safe there. I was a real property tax director. I used to
yes.
get blamed on the tax all the time. I said, I don't vote on the budget. I just, I'm an administrator.
right. There's that.
So you're safe. Yeah.
Usually
And
at
other
the
judges.
doorstep, that's the first thing you hear.
Yeah, of
but
course.
once I tell them what I'm running for, they warm up pretty quick, and
Sure.
you get a friendly reception.
Yeah.
So it was a good experience.
But seriously, I mean, the judiciary is, it's a very, very important branch of government that we don't talk about that often, or have the opportunity to present to the public, the judicial branch of government. You've had some issues and some recent developments in Schenectady, in the city, not only in the city, but in the state, legislation and some other things that you mentioned before. Can we talk about a couple of those things that are current?
Sure. And one thing your listeners should know, particularly those that are in our community in Schenectady, is that we do have perhaps the busiest city court within our judicial district, which is made up of 11 counties, going west to Montgomery, including Saratoga, all the way to the Canadian border. The City of Schenectady Court, which is made up of several parts, is perhaps the busiest, if not one of the busiest.
Yes.
So anytime there are changes occurring, whether they be legislative changes, developments, it's going to impact not only how the judiciary, how we preside over the courts, but it's going to impact those individuals in our courts, gaining access to our courts, seeking access, or those that find themselves in our courts as litigants.
Yes.
This year, there's a host of developments. Just recently, there's been a lot of talk, I'm sure you know, about the DNA legislation that was signed into law last August of 2012. Now, anytime any individual were to be found guilty or plead guilty to a misdemeanor in my court, it is a requirement that they provide a DNA sample that is submitted to the statewide DNA CODIS database. So that's a big change. Prior to August of 2012, there were only a limited number of misdemeanor level offenses that included that requirement. Now, just about all misdemeanors, any misdemeanor that you plead to requires that that DNA sample be obtained. And the reason for that, as far as the history of the legislation goes, not only as far as Governor Cuomo's involvement, but our Chief Judge, John Littman, was to not only assist in law enforcement efforts, but to also provide access to DNA when available to defendants, not only during litigation, but post-conviction.
Well,
individuals now have there's legislation now that allows defendants seeking exoneration
Yes.
To obtain DNA samples in the database.
Well, it works both ways.
To
Why
compare
not?
to
I mean,
crime
it was,
scenes. That's right.
fairness and justice works both ways. So it is a good law. We all watch court TV and all these things. Us laymen, and I find it very interesting. Some trials and things like that mention the DNA where they're trying to open a cold case or trying to solve a case or prove guilt or innocence, and they don't have the DNA because the misdemeanor offenders never had to provide it.
That's right.
So this is gonna be a big one.
Yeah.
Now, is this going to be passed into law, or has it been passed? Where does it stand?
This is passed. This is in effect.
New York State?
In New York State
Right.
as of August of 2012.
Okay.
So that is a recent legislative development that has been in effect.
Good.
For that date.
Good.
There are some others. You mentioned just watching TV.
Yes.
One of the more recent agendas taken up by our Chief Judge is the allowance of cameras in the courtroom.
Yes.
That's something new. Now, that's legislation that's being put together and being, I think, championed by our Chief Judge, and that's to allow cameras in the courtroom. You can see any of your listeners probably watching court TV or anything
Some
news
of these
at night.
high-profile trials that are going on now.
You see all these cameras in the courtroom,
Yes.
but you never see them in Schenectady. You never see really cases out of New York,
Yes.
where you'll be on court TV watching a real live criminal case, for instance. Well, that's according to our Chief Judge, a relatively antiquated law. It's a law that prohibits cameras under certain exceptions that goes back now for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And with today's technology and the fundamental right to a public trial and access to our courtrooms, thinks they should be in there. So that's something that legislatively might be in the works.
This used to be discretionary on the judge's part in certain courts, like whether they allowed cameras or not. And if so, is this something that would make it mandatory that cameras are in court, or who makes those decisions?
Well, a judge was involved in that decision. There was a certain amount of discretion there, but it's a bit more complicated than that because you had civil rights law sections that came in to often discourage it, if not outright prohibit it. So it wasn't as easy as a judge saying yes, let's do it. Always there were always other considerations in mind.
Yeah.
But that may change soon.
But on the other side of the coin, it's a public trial, as you said. The public has the right to attend.
That's right. Anybody can walk off the street and walk into a courtroom and see not only the judge, the attorneys,
right,
the jury, witnesses.
Yes.
Now, when it comes to cameras in the courtroom, there have been some discussion about, again, perhaps blocking, distorting faces, images, jurors, things like that to protect the identity of individuals. So, not So some allowance for safety concerns
I
as
see.
well,
Yeah.
and privacy concerns.
Yes. Well, we'll see how that all works out. But it's a good, overall, it's obviously it's a good thing, I think. I don't know what the public will think, but let's see where it goes.
Yeah,
But thanks for informing us on that.
Sure. Generally, you're right. I think the public believes anytime it comes to government transparency, let the sun shine in is preferable to
Yes.
secrecy or
Yes.
what might be
Whatever you
closed or
want,
not
whatever you
allowed.
want to call it. Yeah. And that's why we're here on Impact. You're watching Impact. I'm Nick Barber, your host, and we're visiting with Judge Matt Sypniewski, the city court judge for the City of Schenectady, New York. And we're talking about some recent developments and things that are happening in the judicial system. You mentioned a couple of other things that are going on that you might want to tell our viewers.
Two other significant developments. One that's already been passed is how judges, like myself, consider and set bail for individuals, criminal defendants who appear before them.
Mm-hmm.
Recently enacted, 2012, there's now sections relating to domestic violence cases specifically, where a judge in setting bail is allowed to consider any prior violations of orders of protections in domestic cases, or any prior use, illegal use, or illegal possession of firearms.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any history of that, that is criteria that a judge can use in determining what is the appropriate bail to not only secure the return of the defendant, but to also take into consideration the seriousness of domestic violence cases.
Mhm.
So that's is enacted. That's currently in place, and there is a related development to bail that in November of this year, 2013, will come into effect, and that is a provision that will now allow judges to consider public safety when setting bail. Strangely enough, you might think that's something judges would consider.
Well, you would.
But we're only one of 4 states in the country right now that do not allow judges to consider either the public safety of the community or the safety of individuals in a household when setting bail.
Well, how is that administered? I mean, not allowed to. I mean, is it a conscious thing or what?
It's statutory.
How is it? So does that mean it can't be in the record, or what is not allowed? You know, say the judge is aware but can't use it. How is it prohibited or not used?
Well,
that information.
Well, the information's there. Any information available to a judge is, I suppose, in conjunction as a whole, might be something that's taken into consideration.
Mm-hmm.
But statutorily, in New York, there are only certain criteria that a judge is permitted to rely upon.
I see.
And those traditionally have been a previous history of failing to come to court,
Mm-hmm.
criminal record,
Mm-hmm.
and ties to the community, things like that.
I see.
So an individual who is, I guess hypothetically, a local individual who's never been arrested and therefore also has no history of not coming to court could very well be charged with a violent crime. And even though that violence might be indicative of the potential for harming if
Mm-hmm.
that individual were to be released,
Mm-hmm.
members in the community or members in his own household, under the ordinary criteria, bail might be set much lower than it could be if a judge were instead able to consider that public safety concern or
Yes.
household safety concern, which a judge is going to be able to do beginning November of this year.
I see.
And the other major development, just to quickly move to that,
Sure.
is that the Chief Judge is proposing legislation that would increase the age of criminal responsibility here in New York from 16 to 18.
Well, that's a big one. I
Very-
mean, in a way, it's a big one, but it's a big change.
Well, it's a big change, and it's something that New York now is in a slim minority. It's only New York.
Why are we so much in the minority on these issues and laws? Is it like because we're such a huge system and so many jurisdictions? What is it about New York State? You don't have to answer, but I'm just sort of a rhetorical question, you know.
And I don't know that I can.
That we're one of four states. Well, don't even try because I don't want to, put you on the spot. Yeah. But it just struck me that we're in the minority of several different areas.
One of two.
Yeah.
When it comes to the United States, one of two states, New York and North Carolina, that treat 16-year-olds as adults for criminal responsibility purposes.
Mm-hmm.
So the Chief Judge is trying to propose legislation that would change that, create what he terms youth diversion courts, youth division courts,
Mm-hmm.
Would raise the age of adult criminal responsibility for nonviolent offenses, which is important.
Yes.
And significant
Yeah.
distinction, but for nonviolent offenses up to 18, which
Mm-hmm.
would reflect what is the predominant case throughout the country
Yeah.
of all the other states.
Yes.
So we'll see if that comes into effect in the next year or so. But
Yes.
again,
That's
a lot of changes.
That's pending proposed legislation, right?
If
Or
not,
if you
not
would.
pending, it's
Yeah.
something that certainly was. I believe the Chief Judge tried to get the legislature to consider last year, but
Okay.
it was just at the end of their session. So we'll
Okay.
see if this
So-
year there's a bill to consider.
It's in progress. Yeah. Thank
Yeah,
you, Judge.
but-
In the past recently we had the League of Women Voters representatives on impact, Helga Schroeder and Cheryl Neckerman. But one issue was that they're, putting pressure on the governor is to appoint a vacancy to the family court. There's a family court judge vacancy in Schenectady County. Now, did you ever sit in family court? Are you ever assigned to other matters besides city court matters like a lot of judges are? Do you?
Not family
whether it's
court.
family court, but I know judges when the need is there are sometimes assigned to things outside their court when the state office court administration has a need.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about family court. You have knowledge of it, but you're not a family court judge, so we qualify that. But there's a need for another judge or a vacancy for an appointment that's not filled in Schenectady County.
And our administrative judge, Vito Caruso, has
Yes.
acknowledged as much.
Yes.
He is our administrative judge for this district, and I am familiar with the court. I've never presided in it, but I can certainly attest to the high volume of cases. It is a very busy court, a lot of cases on the dockets, and it certainly wouldn't hurt to have a new judge in there to help Judge Powers tackle that caseload.
Yes.
While not sitting in the court, I can tell you that oftentimes I see cases overlap where individuals will have perhaps a case in my court,
Yes.
a criminal matter,
Yes.
that is somehow tied to a family court proceeding.
Right.
And in my experience, I know that to be a busy court. So it certainly would be helpful to have somebody there to assist the hearing
Yes.
officers and Judge Powers with that caseload.
So hopefully the governor will make an appointment soon. We'll see.
We'll see.
You don't have to comment on that. You don't have to lobby for it. It's just
No,
it's
no.
good to talk to judges in various courts because let's face it, you all know the system. You know the other judges. You know what they're facing. And before we leave, let's talk about your caseload in the city of Schenectady. What's your situation there? How does that work? And how many city court judges are there?
Well, there are three of us, myself, in addition to Judge Guido Loyola and
Yes.
Judge Mark Blanchfield.
Yes.
The three of us, on a rotating basis, handle all of the parts in the city court. We have parts. What I mean by that are certain courts handling certain types of cases.
Yeah.
We have our criminal court, which is, as I said, one of the busiest, if not the busiest, in our particular jurisdiction. We have our landlord-tenant court.
That's a
and we
busy
that's
area.
Also
Yes.
busy. We have our small claims, commercial claims.
Oh, yes.
These are civil matters.
Right.
And we have, in addition to that, our traffic court. And we also have an alternative treatment court, a court that I preside over. And that court deals specifically with individuals who suffering from mental health issues, illness. We try to divert out of the criminal justice system in nonviolent cases to help stabilize them in terms of housing, medication, social services, anything to try to get those individuals out of a reoccurring cycle in the criminal justice system. So all five parts are very busy.
Yes, I can imagine.
And so for that
Yeah.
reason, I can speak to at least on on the state of our judiciary here in family court as well throughout the state. We have one of the largest and highest volume court judiciary caseloads throughout the country. That's for sure. The number of people accessing our courts and proceeding through our courts is perhaps second to none.
Well, that's a dubious distinction, you know, to have to endure that. But thanks for your service. You know, we're running out of time, but I want to thank you, Judge, for being with us. We've been visiting with Judge Matt Sypniewski, who is the Schenectady City Court Judge, one of three in the city of Schenectady. And we learned a little bit more about you and tried to help the public understand a little more about the court system. We appreciate that.
And I appreciate that opportunity
Oh,
too, Nick.
we hope you come back again soon and visit us again and maybe fill us in on the status of what's going on in new legislation and things that affect the city court and the judicial system as a whole.
I'd
So
like to
thanks
do
for
that,
being
Nick.
here.
Thank you.
Appreciate
All right,
your
good.
coming. Come
Take
back
care.
again.
You bet.
You've been watching Impact. I'm Nick Barber, your host. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.